Good morning, Bande Matram. Welcome all of you. So this morning we are going to discuss one intense spiritual topic, that is on rules and regulations for the inmates of the Sri Aurobindo Ashram. So very interestingly, we are going to focus little bit in-depth discussion. So it will be an in-depth discussion that is based on the rules and regulations for the inmates of the Sri Aurobindo Ashram. That's what we are going to discuss. Mostly seen outwardly, we are living in a liberated atmosphere. We are free almost. Still then, Sri Aurobindo quotes beautifully, the rules are laid down in order to guard against certain influences and their dangers and to keep right atmosphere in the ashram favorable to the spiritual development. For that, actually, this ashram, for the favorable for the spiritual developments of the ashramites, and to guard against certain influences and their dangers. So, and to create the right atmosphere, that has been some rules have been laid down. Again, the obedience is necessary so as to get away from one's own mind and vital to follow the truth. So, to get away from the own mind and vital and to follow the truth, some rules have been laid down, and it will create a spiritual atmosphere. Development will be spiritual development, and of course, it will guard against certain influences and their dangers. And this right atmosphere can be created. That is the version of Sri Aurobindo that has been quoted. Anyway, so far these rules and regulations are concerned, we know most of the times we keep changing the rules. Initially, the early rules 1927 to 29, and the following 1930 another set of rules we found, and third number one is of course 1933. Later on we see 1950 rules, four rules of 1953, and of course later we find the conditions from the for the admission to the ashram 1965. Later we find the second part. Of course, it is based on the rules and regulations for 2003. Of course, in the varieties way, in many various ways, these rules keep changing. Already, purpose you know sometimes it is needful. It has been needful to change the atmosphere. Of course, we are going to discuss everything, basing our thought on 2003 guidelines. As here in the quotes initially, it is the rules and regulations not for the outward world, but actually this is meant for the inmates of the Sri Aurobindo Ashram. On that only Sri Aurobindo quotes, an inmate of Sri Aurobindo Ashram also referred to as the sadhaka. Inmate, and also they have got another identity, that is sadhakas, is a person. How can we define it? Is a person who has voluntarily accepted the aims and ideas for a spiritual life. This is totally voluntary, nothing is imposed, as said by Sri Aurobindo and Mother, and who voluntarily submits himself or herself to the discipline of the ashram, and to whom ashram has extended the facilities that are actually required for leading his or life as a sadhaka. So this is the ashram. The main thing from this line we can focus upon: the inmate, otherwise known as inmates of the Sri Aurobindo Ashram, is otherwise known as the sadhakas. They have accepted voluntarily to accept the rules and regulations, ideals of the spiritual life. So they are known to be sadhakas or inmates of the ashrama. Anyway, we are going to have a brief discussion on the rules and regulation, and that is also almost same, but a few keep changing by the process of time. What is really required, because time, circumstance, and favorability, everything changes continuously day by day. Sri Aurobindo's work is purely spiritual. Initial rule: Sri Aurobindo's work is purely spiritual. An inmate must abstain from all political connections or activities. No politics, power, politics, sex, wine. These are totally they must be renounced. These are not accepted. Anyway, it is from one aspect, political connection or activities must be devoid. They are not at all, can't be intimated. Second, All sexual relations are absolutely prohibited. Number two. Number three, smoking and intake of the alcoholic drink and the non-medicinal, non-prescribed drugs are strictly prohibited. That's what normally seen in the outside world, but it is prohibited. An inmate must abide by rules of residence of his or her place of accommodation, because they have been provided place of accommodation. There they have to adjust, accommodate like this. Number five, an accommodation given to the inmate is intended for his or her use alone. For his or her use alone. Others may visit the room of an inmate during the day, but not allowed to lay in the overnight in the inmate's room without permission of the board of trustees. Exclusively, there are some visitors, they can, friends or something, they can visit the room during the daytime, but can't stay without the permission of the ashram trustee in the during the night time. All furniture, equipment, vehicle, and other items of the utility provided by the ashram to the inmate are personal or departmental. For the personal or departmental use are the property of the ashram, not for the personal use. So all these are not single individual property. It is the property of the ashram and are not to be sold, lent, or disposed by the inmate. Because entirely one must be think whatever is been provided, furniture, equipment, vehicle, or other items, they belong to the ashram. They are not to be used by him or her for any purpose other than one for which they have been given. So it is a spiritual organization. The ashram is 100% spiritual. So purely spiritual, it must be taken care of. Each inmate has to take up some work in the ashram as the part of his or her asana sadhana. Work is the body's best prayer for the divine. Must take some work. We stress upon work to the maximum, as it has been. This work has been stressed and applause most focused in Gita, Bhagavad Gita. The minimum time devoted should be 6 hours a day. The nature and place of work, 6 hours per day minimum, and the exact duration will be decided by the board of trustees according to the individual cases and the needs the ashram. Whatever is needed and whatever is permissible, accordingly board of trustees will decide. And again, the decision of the board of trustees in his regard shall be final and binding on the inmates. That is final. It has to be taken care of. The inmate, again, number 8, an inmate must not involve himself or herself in any private or personal business or take up the employment outside the ashram. Once he is considered the permanent inmate of the ashram, once he has accepted the life, naturally he has to be abided by. And in very exceptional cases, an inmate may do so. So the prior express permission of the board of trustees, can't do personal experience, business, personal appointment outside the ashram without the permission of the trustee. The decision of the board of trustees shall be the final and binding on the inmate. Some rules have been already Sri Aurobindo has quoted and given the message to create the spiritual atmosphere, to help the sadhakas, to help the process of sadhana. Some rules have been formulated that has to be taken, and it is not the based on the mental and vital findings. Number 9, if an inmate engages in personal transaction agreements, financial commerce commitments, or legal proceedings of any nature, the ashram will not be responsible for any liability arising out of them. He is personally responsible for that. The ashram will not be responsible for any personal liability or obligation of an inmate not arising out of or any directly or indirectly connect with the work assigned to him or her by the ashram. So ashram is very clear on its side. So it is a spiritual engagement, and everything must be spiritually done. Again, the inmate must not have the use the ashram name except the indicate his or her address and ashram's symbol or logo for any purpose other than explicitly assigned to him or her by the ashram. So this ashram logo and the name, it must not be misutilized. Again, the inmate should not directly write to or connect any government agency or department or press, newspaper, journalism, or television. No external activities and the relation with these media people. in any matter connected with the ashram except with the specific and express consent of the board of trustees. If they allow the consent, that is different matter. Otherwise, not to be influenced, not to be interacted, or not to be, of course, informed. These media persons must not be. In the event of a theft or accidents, if something is coming or any other such case, the obligation or necessity to report the matter to the stationary statutory authority, the inmate may do so. A copy of the complaint or report should be submitted to the ashram liaison office for any eventual follow-up action that must be done if something theft, accident, or anything. The inmate can always approach the liaison officer for help and guidance in such matters. That is what the primary requirement. An inmate should not conduct himself or herself in manner prejudicial to the interest or image of the Sri Aurobindo Ashram, or affecting its smooth and proper functioning. That must be, because everything is spiritual, purely spiritual. Nothing must hamper or hidden or, of course, resist the interest of the ashram. The decision of the board of trustees is to whether an inmate has conducted himself or herself in a manner prejudicial to the interest of the ashram shall be final and binding on the inmate. So, if they feel, board of trustee feels that something is going wrong and it is deliberate and it has been hampering or it is actually hurting the interest of action anyway, in positive way or negative way, whatever the some board of trustees they feel, that is final and binding on the inmate. Again, number 14, an inmate must not solicit offering or donation in cash or in kind from any individual. They are, because you are there, sadhakas are there for the spiritual, to increase their spiritual efficiency, not to solicit any offering or donations, because they have come, they are dedicated everything, left their house and material life, so must be their advice to must lead the spiritual life. So individual, corporation, or institution, they will in the capacity, unless expressly authorized by the board of trustees, so they will never accept anything from outside source. Number 15, an inmate should not go out of the ashram for any length of time for the reason whatsoever may, without express consent of the board of trustees and without informing prosperity. So they must know before leaving the ashram, going outside for any length of time, they must have obtained the permission of the ashram. An international problem of the ashram or conflicts or differences, in opinion, among the inmates should be sorted out within the community. Must be sorted out. It must not, the thing must not cross the barrier and cross the ashram premises. If an inmate has a grievance with respect to other inmate, if some problems is having some grievance, some problem occurring, or a complaint of any nature, the grievance or complaint should be expressed either to the person in charge of the department or residents or internal advisory committee constituted for the purpose. So everything must be sorted out within the ashram surroundings, ashram premises, and ashram rules and regulations. It must not be allowed to go outside. Under no circumstances should an inmate bring outside agency for intervention in the matter. Most of the time it is strictly followed, must be strictly followed, and obligation must be there. Under no circumstances outside agency must not be allowed to intervene for the intervention of the ashram matter. After due discussion, if necessary, the board of trustee may be approached for appropriate action. If the departmental chief or any the liaising officer or whosoever is unable to take the final decision, then board of trustees may be approached. But under the decision of the board of trustees in this regard shall be the final and binding. Every time we know situation changes, objective changes, sometimes we find more legal obligations, so many ways, because things are increasing fast. Whenever there was nothing, people were leading simply one ashramite sadhu life, very much limited, very much confined. Then the situation was different. Now everything has been changed, widened. Of course, it is more than 100 years of ashram. So things are coming, and where there is divinity, there is stupidity. It must be taken care. Number 17. The final decision in all administrative matters rests in the Board of Trustees of Sri Aurobindo Ashram Trust. Everything, all administrative matters. So, Board of Trustees is the final authority to take decision. This includes all matters arising from or relating to these rules or the breach of any relating to these rules or any breach or breach of the general discipline and the guiding principles of the ashram or other misconducts. So these are the greater things. The board of trustees may take any action if it thinks appropriate in this regard. They have got the authority, they can take the decision, and including, if required, the withdrawal of the accommodation and their facilities extended to the inmate. They have got the authority. They, if they feel something is going on. Anyway, sometimes also we find that is a human error is there. When the mother was there, her guidance was there in physical level, physical state. That was a different issue. Now itself, if things keep changing in a very vigorous way, we know. So if there is any the board of trustees, even they are human being, they have been there keeping guidance. Sometimes they are also, we don't know if nothing reason to be said about the ashram. Better to keep silent, because we must know that the silence is the faithfulness in the divine work. Still, then human error, it happens. It is bound to happen, we can say, but sometimes it some errors are visible to the naked eye. But anyway, this board of trustees, as per the rules of the steer in the ashram for the inmates, it is binding. We have to take care. They may also can hijack the whatever the possibility that can they can withdraw it. Whatever the withdrawal of the accommodation and the facilities extended to the ashram, they can take back if they feel it is necessary. And the decision of the board of trustees shall be final and binding on the inmate. So naturally, there must not be any. There must be obligation. There must not be any complaint later on. It is very clear. Again, it is very much thing. Finally, we have to see the rules of ashram in this form are effective from August 2003. I am saying. I am quoting up to 2003. Later also, already 18 years almost gone. Many rules have been changed, so we are focusing on this one. And this is issued by the present board of trustees through authority delegated to the clause 2 of the trust deed, Sri Aurobindo Ashram Trust, dated October 7th, 1955. It was done. So accordingly, we are moving forward, and this was the ideology, and with this ideology, of course, we are moving, because this is a spiritual organization. The purpose is very simple for the sadhakas, and to elevate and of course escalate the sadhana principle. So they have come here for the ashram, for the sadhana. So there some work must be done. They must found themselves confined to the spiritual purpose, spiritual life, and the spiritual order of the entirely. So there must be some rules and regulation, and of course this is not, you can say this is rules and regulation. But after mother physical withdrawal of the mother and the master, something was real needful, and there is no other go. And of course we are also going by that rules and regulation. Anyway, rules and regulation, it is a mental thing. After the withdrawal of the master and all, they are in the subtle physical, they are very much present and very much prominent. Of course, we see most of the time we find their presence in the subtle physical level. We find them, we talk to them, we just correlate them. But thing is that mostly, if someone needs to be spiritual, naturally he has to gain his consciousness. Everything here is related, and of course based on the consciousness. This consciousness has to be elevated. Mind and all, from the ordinary mind, you have to rise up in the process of evolution. It is a very drastic step. Of course, it is a very delayed process. For that, actually, we have to, what we have to do, the spiritual process, sadhana, And these are the most required things. We don't have any objection. We must not have any personal preferences, inferences. Something will be there. We must be abided by the rules, and most of all, it must be fundamentally. We must be determined, because the master and the mother, they are our guide. So we must go, we must have a faith and confidence and with them, and we must have aspiration. That is what the requirement. Anyway, we must be abided by the rules. It is rules for the inmates of the Sri Aurobindo Ashram. I will quote it again. Thank you. Dhanyavad.